My brother stripped me, tied me to a chair, and beat me until I bled, so I took revenge. But before I tell you how, you need to understand who I was before that night, the night he broke every part of me that still believed we were family. My name is Clara Duval, and I'm 58 years old. I live in a small rural town where people still wave at each other on porches and pretend evil doesn't grow inside bloodlines. But evil grew in my brother, Mason. Slowly. Quietly. Like mold in the walls. And no one noticed until I was screaming, tied naked to a chair in the dark. Growing up, it was just the two of us, me and Mason, after our parents died in a car crash. I was 17, he was 20. We clung to each other, or at least I did. I believed he was my protector. He paid for my school, made sure I ate, hugged me when I cried. But somewhere between then and now, something inside him rotted. He became cruel with words first. Stupid girl. Ungrateful thing. But I chalked it up to stress. He lost jobs often. Drank more. Gambled what little we had. I stayed, thinking I owed him for everything. It was a lie I told myself for too long. Last winter, something snapped. I had hidden some money $4,000 from odd jobs, kept under a loose board beneath my bed. I planned to run. Leave. Start over. I think he sensed it. That night, he came home drunk. No, not drunk, feral. I remember the crack of the floorboards as he stomped toward my room. His eyes weren't human anymore. He called me a traitor. Accused me of plotting against him. Before I could run, he ripped the blanket off me, yanked me out of bed, dragged me down to the basement. I clawed at the walls. Screamed until my throat tore. Then came the cold. The biting air against my skin. He'd stripped me every layer. I was trembling, sobbing, pleading. Shut up, he snarled, tying me to the old wooden chair with those thick orange extension cords. You want to leave me? Let me give you a memory to take with you. Then came the belt. Then his fists. The back of a rusted shovel. My blood hit the floor like oil on old concrete. I remember the taste of metal, the sound of my teeth grinding, the pain spreading down my spine. I thought I would die that night, but I didn't. 3 hours later, when he finally passed out upstairs, I managed to get free. I crawled, bare, broken, bleeding, into the bathroom, locked the door, and stared at myself in the mirror. My body was covered in purple-black bruises, open cuts, rope burns on my wrists and thighs. I looked like a corpse. But my eyes, they were alive. Burning. That night, I stopped being his sister. I became his shadow. His consequence. His slow, creeping end. But revenge, real revenge, takes time. And I had time. I didn't go to the police. That would have been too easy for him. Mason would have cried, twisted the story, charmed the sheriff like he always did. And the town? They would have just shaken their heads and whispered, poor Mason. His sister's gone mad. No, I needed more than justice. I needed him to feel everything he made me feel slowly. Without warning. Like infection spreading under skin. The next morning, I cleaned the basement. Not because I forgave him, but because I wanted him to forget. I scrubbed my own blood off the concrete, bleached the walls, stitched my arms where they split open. I left the bruises. They reminded me. Every throb, every ache whispered, remember this. He woke up around noon, scratching his head like nothing happened. His breath still smelled like bourbon. His voice was sweet. You're up early, he said, yawning. Everything okay between us, sis? I stared at him, my lips swollen, my ribs screaming. And I nodded. Yeah, Maze. We're good. The first scar he never saw was that lie. Over the next few weeks, I cooked his meals, smiled when he grunted, and laughed at his stupid jokes. But inside, I was studying him, his routines, his vulnerabilities. I planted guilt like seeds. I started slipping little things into his world that twisted his sense of control. Nothing obvious. Not yet. Just enough to make him question reality. I moved his keys from the kitchen hook to the freezer, poured out half his liquor, and refilled the bottles with vinegar. One day, I turned all the clocks forward by 2 hours and watched him scream at the television for airing the wrong news segment. His paranoia grew like ivy wrapping around his spine. I think someone's sneaking into the house, he muttered once, eyes darting. You hearing things at night, Clara? No, I said softly, brushing crumbs off the table. Maybe it's just your imagination. He didn't sleep well after that. I did. Then came the cuts. Small ones at first. Just a slit on his bedsheets. Then a tear in his favorite flannel shirt. Then his shaving cream, replaced with toothpaste. He grew more agitated. Drank more. Hit the walls. Cursed the silence. What the hell's happening in this house? He roared one night, slamming a chair across the room. I said nothing. Just kept stirring my soup. You see, Mason was the kind of man who needed control like oxygen. He needed to feel stronger, smarter, needed me beneath his boot. So I didn't fight back when he shoved me that night or slapped the spoon out of my hand. I just cried quietly and whispered, I'll fix it. But I was never fixing the soup. I was fixing him. One evening, I found an old tape recorder in the attic from Dad's radio days. I dusted it off, rewound it, and waited for the right moment. That night, I placed it under his bed and let it play a loop of whispers, faint, breathy things. You'll pay for what you did. She's watching you. You're not safe anymore. He woke up screaming at 3:12 a.m., tore the sheets off his bed, punched the wall until his knuckles bled. I was waiting in the hallway, holding a glass of water, acting like a frightened sister. Mason? What's wrong? There's someone here, he gasped. They're whispering to me. Maybe it's just stress. He stared at me, then at the shadows behind me, like he couldn't tell who was real anymore. Exactly what I wanted. He didn't notice that the scar on my lip was healing, that my spine was straightening, that my eyes, once full of terror, were now cold, calculated. He didn't notice that for the first time, I wasn't afraid of him. No, I was watching him rot. And the best part? He had no idea it had already begun. The thing about madness is it doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps. It stalks. It whispers. And by the time you realize it's inside you, it's already rearranged everything you believe. That's exactly what I wanted for Mason. The bruises on my thighs were still faintly visible, faded to sickly yellow and green. But inside me, something darker bloomed, something sharp. I was no longer the sister who cooked his meals or folded his laundry. I was the architect of his downfall. It started with the mirror. One morning, he came out of the bathroom with shaving cuts running down his cheek like red tears. The mirror's fogged up weird, he grunted. I saw something in it behind me. A shape. I tilted my head. Maybe just steam? He didn't reply. He just stared at his reflection in the dark window across the room, as if it might move. Later that night, I snuck in while he slept and carefully etched the words I remember into the fogged glass with the edge of a hairpin. Then I cleaned it until the letters disappeared, until the next time he took a hot shower. When he did, the words reappeared, as if written by something invisible watching him. He screamed so loud that the bathroom door rattled on its hinges. I stayed quiet behind the kitchen counter, listening to the chaos. My hands trembled, not with fear, but anticipation. I was breaking him piece by piece, and he didn't even know the weapon was me. That same week, I turned off the breaker while he was watching TV, plunging the house into darkness. Then I creaked open his bedroom door slowly. Just an inch. Just enough. And I waited. Mom, he called out once. His voice cracked. Dad? I didn't answer. Instead, I left an old photograph of our parents, ripped straight down the middle on his nightstand the next morning. He didn't go to work that week. Barely spoke. Just sat in the recliner with a baseball bat in one hand and a rosary he hadn't touched in 20 years in the other. His eyes were rimmed red from lack of sleep. He stank of fear and whiskey. Good. I wanted his body to feel the exhaustion mine once felt, tied to that chair, hours passing like years, my blood mixing with the cold cement. He started locking his door at night, not knowing the extra key was already hidden in my pocket. I didn't use it yet. I just liked knowing I could. Then came the scream. It was around 2 a.m. A bone-deep, gut-curdling, mortal scream from his room. I ran in, pretending panic. Mason, what happened? He was crouched in the corner, sobbing, the bat clutched tight. I saw her, he whispered. I saw Mom. In the mirror. Her eyes were black. She was crying blood. I kneeled beside him, placed a trembling hand on his shoulder. "Mason, I think you're just tired. Don't lie to me," he snapped, grabbing my wrist. "You saw something too, didn't you? In the basement that night?" His voice caught. I held a stare. "What happened in the basement, Mason?" He blinked, breath shallow. For a moment, he was almost human again. I don't know. I think I lost control." I slowly pulled my hand away. "Well," I said softly, "maybe it's coming back for you." He didn't sleep at all after that. Over the next few days, he put salt at the windows, started talking to himself, writing symbols in chalk by the front door. He even brought home a Bible and placed it on his nightstand, like holy words could protect him from the ghost of what he did. But I was no ghost. I was flesh. I was the wound he left behind, walking, breathing, bleeding justice with every step. And I was only just beginning. It's a strange feeling watching the man who once broke your bones now jump at shadows. Mason no longer walked through the house like he owned it. His steps were cautious, hesitant, like the floorboards might open up and swallow him. He had become the prey, and I made sure he knew it without ever saying a word. But revenge, if you want it to last, must be served slowly. That night, I stood in the doorway of his room while he snored. The air reeked of stale beer and sweat. The baseball bat was still beside his bed, though his grip on it had weakened. I walked in and quietly placed something under his mattress, a rusted belt, the very one he used on me in the basement. The same cracks in the leather. The same dried blood. Then I slipped back into my room. The next morning, I heard the crash, followed by panicked gasps. "Clara," he screamed. "What the hell is this?" He stormed into the kitchen, the belt gripped like a snake in his hand. His face was pale, his eyes bloodshot. "Did you put this in my bed?" I looked at him, calm, tired. "What are you talking about?" "This." He flung the belt onto the table. "I threw this thing out. I buried it." I tilted my head. "Then maybe it came back." He froze. I leaned in closer. "Maybe it wants you to remember." He didn't answer. His hands began to tremble. "Good." He was unraveling. That day, I played an old home video on the living room TV. One from our childhood. In it, we were sitting in the backyard, our mom brushing my hair while Mason played with a toy truck. His voice was soft, his laugh innocent. But as the tape played on, I watched him, really watched. Even then, at age 10, there was something in his eyes. A quiet cruelty. A need to break things. When Mason came out of the hallway and saw the footage, his face went white. "Where did you find that?" he whispered. "It was in the attic," I lied. "Right next to Dad's hammer. The one you used to fix the shed, and the one you almost used on me." He turned away. That night, he locked himself in his room again. But it didn't matter, because I had the next piece ready. I waited until 3 a.m. Then I slid the tape I'd recorded weeks ago, my own voice, whispering phrases he used during my beating, into the player. I adjusted the volume just enough to be heard through his walls. "You ungrateful little rat. You made me do this. I'll teach you pain." The moment he heard his own words echoing back at him, I heard the thud of him falling out of bed. Then a guttural sound, a sound I will never forget, like an animal choking on guilt. He screamed, but not at me. He screamed at himself. The next day, he didn't come out of his room at all. No footsteps. No toilet flush. Just silence. I stood outside his door, holding a tray. "I made soup, Mason. Come eat something." No reply. I set the tray down. Then, softly, I whispered the one sentence I knew would finish digging under his skin. "Do you remember what you said to me when I begged you to stop?" Still nothing. "I do. You said, 'You're not my sister anymore.'" I stepped back. "Well, you're right." He didn't know it, but I had installed a tiny camera inside his room, hidden in the corner vent. That night, I sat up watching him pace like a lunatic, tearing books apart, muttering things under his breath. He thought he was being haunted. But the truth was worse. He was being mirrored. Everything he did to me, I was giving it back in fragments. No police. No public shame. Just private torment. And tomorrow, I would give him something worse. Tomorrow, he would taste the chair. I cleaned the basement for 2 hours that morning. Scrubbed the floor until the scent of bleach overwhelmed even the memories. I wasn't doing it for cleanliness. I was doing it for clarity. The kind you need when you're about to invite your abuser back into the same place he turned you into something half dead. The chair was still there. Same one. Wobbly legs. Chipped paint. Bits of my blood still lived in the cracks of the wood. But I had repainted it white, clean, almost angelic. I wanted him to sit in it and not recognize it. I wanted him to feel safe, just for a second. Then I would show him hell. That afternoon, I made him tea. Chamomile, with a touch of honey. And 2 crushed sleeping pills dissolved at the bottom. Mason didn't even question it. He was so exhausted from the whispers and shadows I'd planted in his head that he sipped it in silence, his hands trembling like he had the chills. Within 15 minutes, his eyes began to drift. "I feel weird," he mumbled, blinking slowly. "You're just tired," I said gently, rising from my seat. "Why don't you come downstairs? I've got something to show you." A surprise. His eyelids fluttered. His body sluggish. But he nodded. I led him down the wooden basement steps like a lamb to slaughter. The room was dimly lit, just a single overhead bulb swaying slightly. The air was cold, dense with memory. And the chair was placed directly beneath the light. He blinked at it. "Why does that look familiar?" I said nothing, just helped him lower his heavy body into it. I don't think I should, I whispered. "It's okay. Rest." He barely flinched as I tightened the leather straps around his wrists and ankles. Real straps this time. Strong. Clean. No fraying. His head lolled to the side as the pills did their work, just enough to dull his fight, not enough to knock him out completely. He was awake enough to feel what was happening, just not strong enough to stop it. Perfect. When his wrists were secured and his legs bound tight, I stood back and looked at him. His breathing had changed. Slower now. Confused. He opened his mouth. "CL. Clara." I leaned in until my face was inches from his. "Do you know what this chair is, Mason?" He looked around, blinking hard, as if trying to shake a dream. I was here. Before. I did something here." "No. You didn't do something. You destroyed something." I slowly walked behind him. "You stripped me. You tied me up. You beat me until my skin peeled off in sheets. You told me I was nothing." "I didn't mean to," he whispered, tears forming. "I wasn't, right in the head, you're right," I said softly. "But now, neither am I." I stepped in front of him again and held up a small hand mirror. "Look at yourself." He stared. His eyes were sunken, skin blotched with stress and guilt. He looked 20 years older than he had just a month ago. "You don't look like the man who used to hold me when I cried," I whispered. "You look like the man who made me wish I'd died that night." A tear slipped from his eye. "Please," he whispered. "Please don't hurt me, oh Mason," I said gently, brushing a strand of greasy hair from his forehead. I already did. I turned the small speaker on. And once again, his own voice, filled the room. "You deserve this, Clara. I'll beat the lies out of you. Cry all you want. No one's listening." He began to shake. No. Turn it off." But I didn't. I turned it louder. I walked around him as the recording played, circling him like a vulture. His breathing grew rapid. His eyes wild. He tried to yank at the restraints, but the chair didn't budge. Then I brought out the belt. Not to use it. Just to show it. His screams began before I even lifted it. "I'm sorry," he howled. "I'm sorry, Clara. Please, I don't know who I was." I knelt down so he could see my face, calm, clear, unflinching. "I do," I whispered. "And now, so do you." I didn't beat him. I didn't touch him. I left him there overnight with nothing but a light, his own voice, and the truth echoing over and over through the speakers. By morning, he had pissed himself. And something in his mind had snapped. But I wasn't done yet. Revenge wasn't about bruises. It was about watching the person who once believed they had power beg to be erased. And he would. Soon. By morning, the basement was silent. No screaming. No cursing. Just shallow breaths and the soft hum of the old speaker system playing nothing but static now. I stood at the top of the stairs, holding a warm bowl of oatmeal. I hadn't slept. I didn't need to. The satisfaction in my veins kept me alert. When I stepped down, I could smell him before I saw him. Piss. Sweat. Humiliation. He was slumped forward in the chair, the straps cutting into his skin, head hanging like a broken doll. His mouth trembled like he wanted to speak, but couldn't decide whether it was worth it. "Good morning, brother," I said, voice cheerful. "Hungry?" He looked up slowly. His eyes weren't just bloodshot, they were broken. His lips parted, and in a rasp I barely recognized, he whispered, "Why are you doing this?" I placed the oatmeal on the table beside him and sat down, folding my hands in my lap. "You don't remember that night, do you?" He flinched. "You remember the rage, maybe. The belt. The blood. But you don't remember the moment I stopped being your sister." I leaned closer. "You don't remember how you made me kneel, naked, crying while you laughed. How you shoved me down and told me to bark like a dog. Do you?" His chin trembled. "No," I said softly. "Of course you don't. Because it wasn't important to you. But I remember everything, Mason. I remembered it every time I tried to sleep. Every time I heard your footsteps upstairs and froze like prey." I took a deep breath. "And now you will remember it too. For the rest of your life." He started crying again. The pathetic, soft kind of cry that comes from someone who's finally realizing no one is coming to save them. I didn't feel pity. I felt peace. "Let's try something different today," I said, rising. I walked to the old workbench in the corner and pulled out a large cardboard box. Inside were items he'd recognize, things I'd kept hidden over the years. The wallet he stole from me. The photos he tore up of me and my first love, back when I dared to be happy. A cracked ceramic bowl he broke over my back once because I made dinner too cold. I laid them out like a museum exhibit. "Do you remember these?" I asked. His head twitched slightly. "Clara, I wasn't myself. You were always yourself," I snapped. "That's the problem." I took the old belt in my hands. Not to use it. Just to let the leather creak through the air like a whisper from the past. "I want you to sit with your sins. Feel them. Let them crawl inside your ears like they did in mine." He started to shake again. "You'll stay here until you name each thing you did to me. Every slap. Every scream. Every bruise you left on my thighs. Every night you locked me in the cold basement like a mutt. Name them, Mason." I can't, then you'll stay." I turned and walked away, up the stairs, and shut the door. I let the silence devour him. For 2 days, I only gave him water and left a recorder running in the corner of the room. Every sound, every mumble, every self-pitying whimper documented. On the 3rd day, I played it back to him. Every time he muttered, "I'm sorry," I paused the tape and whispered, "But what for, Mason?" He never answered. Not yet. But the rot had started to spread inside him. The same rot he once planted in me. His arrogance had died. His temper had withered. He was now a shell in a chair that had once been mine. And still, I wasn't finished. I didn't want to hurt him with fists. I wanted to burn him with the one thing he could never beat out of me: truth. Tomorrow, I would bring him the final mirror. Not glass. Not metal. But a letter. And once he read it, he would finally remember everything. The morning I wrote the letter, I wore the same sweater he tore open the night he dragged me to the basement. The neckline was still stretched, the threads frayed, but I wore it anyway. It was a quiet act of defiance. A reminder that he hadn't destroyed me, not completely. Not forever. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and paper. No typing. No fancy fonts. Just ink and hand and pain. I wrote it like a confession. But it wasn't mine. It was his. "Mason, I'm writing this because you won't speak the truth aloud. So I'll do it for you. You tied me to a chair. You ripped the clothes off your own sister. You beat me until I couldn't see, couldn't breathe, couldn't even scream anymore. And then you left me bleeding like roadkill in a basement that still stinks of rot. You called it anger. I call it evil. You thought I'd stay silent forever. You thought fear would keep me loyal. But I kept everything. Your words. Your threats. The cracked bone in my shoulder that still aches when it rains. And now it's your turn to be silent. Sit. Listen. Remember. You will not walk out of this basement until you can say, without stuttering, without crying, exactly what you did. Because only then will I even consider letting you go. I signed it, your sister, and folded it neatly into an envelope. That afternoon, I entered the basement. The air was heavy, the same way it feels before a thunderstorm. Mason looked up with hollow eyes. His lips were cracked, his hair matted to his forehead with sweat. He looked like a man who had been dragged to hell and left there. I handed him the envelope. Read it. His hands trembled so badly that he struggled to open the flap. When he finally got it unfolded, I sat in the corner, watching as his eyes moved across every word. The silence stretched long and painful, and then his shoulders collapsed inward, like the words had punctured something vital inside him. I'm sorry, he whispered again. No, I said. Say what you did. He shut his eyes, shook his head. I can't. Then you stay. I stood up, turned off the lights. I'll be back tomorrow. But before I reached the top step, I heard him call out. Clara, wait. I turned. He was crying, mouth open, chest heaving. A child again. Lost and terrified. I tied you up, he choked out. I beat you. I stripped you. I said you weren't human. I called you names. I laughed when you begged. He broke down, choking on every syllable. I thought if I hurt you enough, you'd never leave. I didn't want to be alone. I didn't want you to go. I stared at him. So you caged me instead. He nodded slowly, tears dripping off his chin. I stepped forward, looked him dead in the eye. You wanted me to stay, Mason. Well, I stayed. But not for you. I leaned in until he could smell the soap on my skin, the control in my breath. I stayed for me. For this moment. Then I left. And for the first time in his life, Mason didn't shout after me. He just wept. Not for me. For the man he had become. The next morning, I didn't go to the basement right away. I wanted him to wait. To sit in his own sweat and shame and replay every sentence of that letter in his mind until it stained the walls of his skull. I made myself coffee, took a long bath, brushed my hair slowly, savoring the peace. I had never known this version of myself, quiet, strong, patient. And I liked her. At noon, I opened the basement door. Mason, I called calmly. I'm coming down. The air hit me like a wave. Damp, sour, full of fear. But underneath it, something had changed. I couldn't hear him pacing. No crying. No muttering. Just silence. He was sitting perfectly still in the chair, arms slack in the restraints, head bowed. He looked almost serene. I thought you left, he said hoarsely without looking up. No. I made a promise. I finish what I start. He slowly lifted his head. His eyes were rimmed with red, but they were clearer than before. More focused. As if something in him had finally cracked open and let the poison drain out. I remember everything now, he whispered. I remember the look in your eyes when I raised the belt. I remember your ribs showing through your skin after I starved you. I remember the screams echoing off the basement walls and how I didn't care. He looked at me, really looked. I was worse than a monster. I was a coward hiding behind anger. I stayed silent. He swallowed hard. If you want to kill me, Clara, I won't fight you. I won't even scream. My heart beat steady. I stepped forward and reached into my pocket. For a moment, his body flinched, pure instinct, as if he still expected pain. But all I pulled out was a small key. He stared at it like it was fire. I crouched beside him. This unlocks your wrists. Your ankles. His eyes widened. You're letting me go? No, I said flatly. I'm giving you a chance. His mouth opened, then closed. I leaned in close, my voice sharp and low. You're not free, Mason. Not yet. You don't get to walk out of this house and pretend you've changed. You're going to earn it. He swallowed. How? I stood, walked across the room, and pointed to the same spot where he had left me to bleed all those weeks ago. Kneel, I said. His breath caught. Kneel where I did. Right there. On the cold floor. No excuses. No hesitation. He stared at the concrete, then slowly, achingly, lowered himself onto it. The bones in his knees creaked. His hands trembled as they touched the ground. I stepped closer. What do you see? He looked up confused. What do you see, Mason? He looked around. I. I see the wall. The water stains. The crack in the floor, no, I said. Look harder. And finally, his gaze dropped. To the faint, permanent stain in the cement. My blood. He stared at it like it was an ancient ruin. Something sacred. Something cursed. That's what you left behind, I said. Not just the scars on my body. But that? A reminder. A proof. Tears slid silently down his cheeks. He bowed his head again, forehead pressing to the floor. I'm sorry, he choked. For every time. For everything. I don't deserve forgiveness, Clara. I said nothing for a long time. Then, gently, I placed the key on the table. I'm going upstairs. If you can look at yourself in the mirror tonight and still say you want to live, then you can come up. Washington eat. Sleep. But tomorrow, we begin my rules. He didn't speak. I turned, climbed the stairs, and shut the door behind me. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid of him. He was no longer the man who had broken me. He was the man who would now live each day knowing I had broken him back, without raising a single fist. And that was more powerful than revenge. It was control. The next morning, I didn't knock. I walked straight into the basement, holding a folded towel and a plate of eggs. He was no longer tied to the chair. Mason was sitting on the cold floor near the wall, wrapped in the thin blanket I'd left him. He looked smaller somehow, like he had shed layers of something rotten and was now shivering in the skin that remained. When he saw me, he stood immediately. Not in defiance. In obedience. Thank you for letting me out of that chair, he said softly. I didn't let you out, I replied. You chose to step out. That's different. He nodded slowly, lowering his eyes like a scolded child. I handed him the towel. Shower. You reek. He took it wordlessly and went upstairs. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. He had learned not to raise his voice, not to test my patience. And if he tried to run? Well, I had the only working phone. The keys. His wallet. His boots were already buried in the garden. 10 minutes later, he came down, wet hair sticking to his forehead. His shirt clung to him, revealing how thin he had become. I pointed to the plate. Eat it all. He obeyed, chewing slowly, like every bite tasted of guilt. I sat across from him, watching, arms folded. When he finished, I spoke again. Today begins your sentence. His eyes flicked up. You want forgiveness? You want to live in this house again? Walk through these rooms like a human being? Then you earn it. Under my terms. I'll do anything, he whispered. Good, I said. Because today, you start by cleaning the basement. Top to bottom. Every inch. You'll scrub the bloodstain, my blood. With your bare hands. No gloves. You'll smell it. You'll see it. And you'll remember what put it there. He nodded, throat tight. Yes, Clara. I'm not finished. I leaned forward, locking my eyes on his. From now on, you speak only when spoken to. You eat only what I give you. You don't leave this property. You don't touch a phone, a key, or a mirror without my permission. You wake at dawn. You ask before sitting. You answer every question with honesty. The moment you lie, I paused. You go back in the chair. He shuddered. I understand. No, I said calmly. But you will. I handed him a small bucket of water, bleach, and a rag. No breaks, I said. And when you're done, you'll read your letter. Out loud. From beginning to end. He blinked, confused. To who? I stared him down. To me. The rest of the day, he worked like a prisoner. Sweat dripped down his neck. His hands turned raw and red. The stench of bleach and old blood filled the basement air. I stayed on the steps, watching, listening to every grunt, every whispered apology under his breath. And when he finished, I made him stand in the center of the room, barefoot, broken, and hold the letter I wrote for him. Read, I commanded. He opened the paper, hands shaking, and began. His voice cracked on the first sentence. By the fifth, tears ran down his face. By the last, his legs gave out and he sank to his knees. I'm sorry, he whispered again, clinging to the letter like a lifeline. I don't deserve your kindness. I don't even deserve to be here. I stepped toward him. No, I said. You don't. I walked past him, opened the basement door, and turned back. But I'm giving you the chance anyway, because I wasn't just taking revenge anymore. I was building a world where I was the one with the power. And he would either live in it under my rules or never leave that basement again. It was strange how the same house that once held my screams now held my silence. For weeks, Mason followed every rule. He woke before sunrise. He ate after I had. He kept his eyes low and his voice lower. The house became a different kind of prison, his now, not mine. And still, every time he passed me in the hallway, I saw it. That flicker of shame, of fear, of waiting for me to lose control like he once did. But I wouldn't. That would have been too easy. He needed to live with what he'd done, not just survive it. On the 10th morning of his sentence, I found him kneeling in the hallway outside the bathroom. No command, no threat. Just kneeling, hands folded in his lap like a penitent. What are you doing? I asked. I had a nightmare, he whispered. I saw you in the chair again. Screaming. Bleeding. And I was laughing. His voice cracked. I woke up sick. I didn't want to move until I remembered what I did. I stared at him for a moment, then turned and walked away. Let him kneel. Let the image of me bleeding haunt every corner of his mind the way it once haunted mine. Later that day, I brought out the photo albums. He flinched when he saw them. I opened to a picture from 25 years ago, our parents' anniversary dinner. I was smiling. He had his arm around my shoulder. Back then, he was still soft-eyed, still human. You remember this night? I asked. He nodded. You broke my necklace when we got home. His face went blank. You don't remember that part, do you? He shook his head slowly. You were drunk. Said I embarrassed you. Said my dress made you angry. You grabbed me by the throat. Took my necklace and crushed it beneath your heel. He whispered I didn't. I never remembered. I turned the page. Picture after picture. Me, shrinking in everyone. Me, fading behind my brother's smile. Behind the mask he wore for the world. You ruined every part of my life, Mason, I said. Not just my body. My self-worth. My friendships. My choices. You rewrote me into a shadow because it made you feel big. He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. Don't speak. Just listen. I let the silence stretch until it burned. Then I rose and walked to the drawer near the fireplace. Pulled out a small notebook, pages yellowed, ink smudged, full of everything I remembered but had never said aloud. I placed it in his lap. Tomorrow, I said, you read that aloud. Every page. Every word. His face paled. Even the details? Especially the details. He nodded without lifting his eyes. And I walked away. That night, I slept deeply for the first time in years. Not because I had forgiven him, but because I no longer needed to fear him. He was no longer my captor. He was my student. And I was teaching him what real pain looked like, not through beatings, not through bruises, but through remembrance. Because sometimes the heaviest chains aren't iron. They're the memories you can't run from. The next morning, I found him already seated in the living room, my notebook resting in his lap, hands shaking around it like it was burning him from the inside. The house was quiet. No radio. No TV. Just the crackle of wood in the fireplace and the weight of what was about to happen. I'm ready, he said, barely above a whisper. I said nothing. I sat across from him, my arms folded, my face unreadable. I didn't offer water. I didn't tell him to begin. I let the moment rot around him, let it choke him slowly until he had no choice but to speak. He opened the notebook, and his voice, cracked and hollow, began. June 14th. He called me disgusting because I wore lipstick. Said I looked like a whore. I hadn't even left the house that day. He stopped. His lips trembled. Keep going, I said. June 19th. He broke my hairbrush across my back. I hadn't folded his laundry the way he liked. His face contorted. He pressed a hand to his chest like it hurt to breathe. Good. June 30th. I tried to run. He chased me barefoot through the woods behind the house. I hid under a rotted canoe for 6 hours. He told me later he would have buried me if I left. His voice broke completely. But I said nothing, because I had lived it. I had bled beneath that canoe, bitten by ants, shivering in fear, praying he'd lose interest. And now he was finally tasting it. Word by word. Memory by memory. He kept reading. July 12th. He found my savings, $4,000 in rolled bills. It was gone by morning. He said women didn't need money. Said I should be grateful I wasn't dead. Tears dripped onto the paper now, smudging the ink. He struggled to breathe, his shoulders rising in short gasps. July 19th. The basement. He dragged me down the stairs, stripped me, tied me to the chair. Hit me until my ears rang. I screamed for hours. No one came. He stopped. His eyes locked on mine. I didn't know, he choked. I didn't know you kept all of this. I had to, I said. Because you'd never remember otherwise. He placed the notebook on the floor and collapsed into himself, rocking slightly. I'm sorry. I swear to God, I'm so sorry. I don't know who I was. No, I said coldly. You do. You just didn't care until now. He broke then. Fully. He sobbed like a child abandoned in the dark, like every page he read had carved pieces from his soul. I didn't comfort him. I watched. Because I needed him to feel that hollow ache. The same one I carried for years, the ache of being treated like nothing, then expected to heal in silence. I never told anyone, I whispered. Never screamed it to the world. I just sat in this house, year after year, dying in pieces. He looked up at me, face red and raw. Then why didn't you leave? I leaned forward, and for the first time, my voice shook. Because I was waiting for this moment. He blinked. For the day you'd see me. Not as your punching bag. Not as your weak, quiet sister. But as the woman who survived every blow. Every lie. Every goddamn belt lash. And then I stood. Your punishment isn't over, Mason. Not even close. You're going to live with this. Every day. And I'm going to remind you. He nodded slowly, wiping his nose with his sleeve. I will, he said. I'll carry it. You already are. I picked up the notebook and pressed it into his chest. Keep this. Read it every morning. Out loud. Let the walls of this house hear it again and again. He held it like scripture. And for the first time, I walked out of the room feeling taller than him. Not just in height, but in power. Because now, every truth was spoken. And his voice couldn't hide behind silence anymore. The next part of his punishment was never physical. Pain fades. Bones heal. But shame clings like smoke in fabric. I didn't want Mason to just remember what he did. I wanted him to face it. And so I took down the mirror from the upstairs hallway, one he always avoided. The same one where I once caught my reflection after he beat me. My face swollen, my lips split, blood trailing down my chin. That mirror had held the ugliest version of me, his version of me. Now it would reflect him. I nailed it to the wall in his bedroom, directly across from his bed. He looked at me confused. Why are you putting that here? You'll see. He didn't understand, not at first. But I did. Every night, when he laid down, that mirror would show him what I saw all those years. Not the brother I once loved, but the man who destroyed me. That first night, he tried to sleep facing the wall. The next morning, I walked in and found the mirror covered with a sheet. I didn't speak. I just ripped the fabric off, slowly, and placed it on the floor. No sheets. No hiding, I said. I can't look at it, he murmured. Then you don't sleep. He didn't protest. But the dark circles under his eyes grew deeper each day. A week passed, and his reflection began to haunt him. He confessed it at breakfast, voice barely audible. It's not just me I see anymore, it's you. I looked up. You in the chair. You crying. You bleeding. Good, I said. He nodded, eyes wet. I closed my eyes and it's still there. It's supposed to be. I wasn't torturing him. I was returning him. Every echo he created in that basement now lived in his mind. The mirror wasn't glass anymore, it was memory. A cruel, polished reminder that he was the villain in the story he tried to erase. 2 nights later, I heard glass shatter. I found him curled in the corner, hands bleeding, the mirror in shards on the floor. I'm sorry, he sobbed. I couldn't bear it anymore. I knelt down, picked up a broken shard, and held it out to him. Then start piecing it together. He looked at me, horrified. I placed the shard in his hand. Fix it. He spent the rest of the night on the floor, trembling fingers pressing glass back into the frame. No glue. Just fragments and time. And blood. The next morning, he came to me. It's done. I followed him to the room. The mirror was jagged now, the cracks spidering through the reflection, but it was whole. Just like me. Still broken in places. Still fragile. But standing. That day, I gave him permission to sit beside me at lunch. Not across. Not below. Beside. A small step. One he didn't deserve yet. But one I allowed because I was in control now. And he knew it. There are some apologies you can't offer face to face. Some forgiveness you'll never get to ask for with words. But you still owe it. And Mason owed it more than anyone. It was time. I woke him early, before the sun touched the windows. No breakfast. No speaking. I just handed him a coat and my car keys. His eyes widened. You're letting me leave the house? You're not leaving, I said. You're being taken. He followed me to the car, stiff, cautious, unsure. He sat in silence the entire ride, his hands folded tightly in his lap, as if he were afraid even the wind might judge him. We drove 37 minutes through fog-drenched woods and sleepy rural roads until we reached the cemetery. The gate creaked as we pushed it open. Mason's breath hitched when he saw where I was leading him. Our mother's grave. The woman who tried to protect me once and failed. The woman Mason betrayed long before he ever laid a hand on me. He stopped a few feet away. His face went pale. I can't. You will, I said coldly. She wouldn't want to see me. She sees you every day, Mason. Every time you close your eyes. Every time you remember her voice and realize you twisted everything she gave you into violence. He looked down. She used to sing to us, he whispered. When Dad hit her, she'd hum so softly, like it could keep us from hearing the blows, then speak to her now. Tell her what you did to her daughter. He dropped to his knees in front of the stone, hands trembling. I'm sorry, Mom, he choked. I'm so sorry. You raised us to love each other, and I became the monster you feared. I hurt her. I broke her. Tears streamed freely now. She was good. And I was cruel. I should have been the one buried here, not you. I didn't stop him. I didn't comfort him. I let him weep. Let the dirt soak in the tears. Let the trees bear witness to his collapse. And when he was too weak to speak, I stepped forward and placed a folded note on the grave. I wrote her every year after she died, I said. Letters she never got to read. She knew, Mason. She always knew something was wrong. She just couldn't stop it. He bowed lower, his forehead pressed against the cold marble. Forgive me, he whispered. Please forgive me. You're not asking her, Mason. He looked up slowly. You're asking me. We stayed there until the wind turned sharp and the morning light thinned behind clouds. On the way home, he didn't speak. But I saw it, the first real fracture in the shell of the man who once thought he was untouchable. He had faced the only woman he feared more than me. And he left her grave with his soul trembling. That night, he didn't sleep. Neither did I. Because the dead had finally heard him speak. And now, the living still had to decide if he was worth saving. Forgiveness is never a moment. It's a war. And I wasn't done testing him yet. That night, after the cemetery, I didn't speak to Mason. Not a single word. I cooked dinner and placed his plate across the table. Sat down. Ate. And left. He didn't touch the food. Not until after I had gone to bed. The next morning, I made breakfast again, but didn't ask him to sit with me. And so it continued. 3 days. 3 days of silence. 3 days where I became the echo he used to be. Cold. Quiet. Watching. He walked carefully around the house, unsure if he had done something wrong again, or if I had finally given up on his redemption. That uncertainty? It mattered. It mirrored the exact dread I once lived with. On the 4th day, I found him kneeling on the porch. Again. No command. I don't know what I've done, he whispered. But I'll fix it. I'll keep fixing it until there's nothing left of me. He looked up at me then, and for the first time, I saw something almost human return to his eyes. Fear not of punishment, but of disconnection. That's when I knew he was breaking in the right direction. I sat beside him. Do you remember what you used to say when I cried? I asked. He flinched. Which time? The last time. The worst night. The chair. He swallowed. I told you crying was useless. That no one would hear it. That you sounded like a dog. I nodded slowly. You took my voice from me. He looked down. So now you're going to earn it back. Not with apologies. Not with chores. With truth. I stood and handed him a journal. Every night, you'll write a page. Not a letter to me. Not excuses. But truth. Memory. Regret. And confession. He took it gently, like something sacred. And when it's full, he asked, then we'll decide if you're human again. That night, I read his first page from the hallway. He didn't know I was listening through the crack in the door as he whispered every line aloud while writing. Today, Clara didn't speak to me. It was the worst pain yet. I would rather be beaten again than feel her silence. I used to think power was in being feared. Now I know real power is when someone can destroy you and chooses not to. He cried again. But not for pity. For clarity. And in that moment, I felt something strange inside me shift, not forgiveness. Not peace. But power. Because he was beginning to understand what he had taken. And what it meant to truly give it back. It had been months since the night Mason beat me with it. The belt. Brown leather. Heavy buckle. The last thing I remembered before passing out. He had hidden it after that night. Buried it somewhere, hoping I'd never find it. But I did. And I kept it. Not out of fear. But for this moment. The day I handed it back to him. I found him scrubbing the baseboards in the kitchen, his knees raw from hours of silent labor. He didn't complain anymore. He just worked, like repentance was a muscle that could only grow through pain. When I placed the belt beside him, he froze. Didn't even breathe. He stared at it like it was a viper coiled to strike. You remember this? I asked. He didn't answer. I knelt beside him. You used it on me until I bled through the chair, Mason. You remember now, don't you? He nodded slowly. Yes. You called it discipline back then. Like I was a child. Like I needed breaking. His eyes welled, but I didn't let him speak. I picked up the belt. Pressed it into his hand. He looked confused. Terrified. I'm giving it to you, I said. Because I want you to feel its weight again. Not in your hand, in your soul. I don't want it, he whispered. Too bad. He flinched as if I'd struck him already. This is yours, I continued. Your tool. Your shame. You don't get to bury it. You carry it. He looked down at the belt. And then, shaking, he wrapped it around his own wrist. Tight. Almost like a shackle. Good, I said. I stood and watched as he trembled, the leather coiled against his skin, pressing into the veins like memory itself. I want you to wear that every day for the next month, I told him. Don't hide it. Don't explain it. Let it burn. He nodded slowly. And for the first time, I saw it. Not just regret. Not just pain. But ownership. He was starting to own what he did. Not excuse it. Not soften it. And that belt? It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was proof. Proof that he could no longer hide behind forgetfulness or fury or grief. He remembered. And now, the same leather that once broke my skin was binding his. It was a Sunday. Cloudless sky. Children laughing somewhere down the block. The kind of morning that made you believe the world could still be gentle. Mason was in the front yard, raking leaves in silence, his face pale under the early sun. He didn't look up when neighbors passed. He hadn't spoken to a single one since I let him out of the basement. But that morning, someone stopped. Mrs. Lorne. She was our neighbor for years. Kind, observant. The type who always brought soup when someone fell ill. She stepped onto the sidewalk and waved at me where I stood near the porch. Good to see you outside, Clara, she said. I smiled. You too. Her gaze shifted to Mason, then narrowed. Why does he have a belt wrapped around his wrist? I watched her face carefully. Mason froze behind me. I could feel the question roll through his spine like thunder. Tell her? Lie? Run? I didn't answer for him. I stepped aside, slowly, and looked at him. Tell her, I said. His lips parted. Then, something unexpected happened. He walked toward the sidewalk. Face pale. Hands trembling. And he spoke. I used this belt to beat my sister, he said calmly. Months ago. I tied her to a chair and made her bleed. Mrs. Lorne gasped, her hand flying to her chest. What? I was sick, Mason continued. Not physically. Inside. Evil. I did things no brother should. I was cruel and violent, and I tried to bury it. But she made me remember. Silence. Heavy. Thick. Unblinking. She gave this back to me, he said, raising his wrist. Not to use, but to carry. As a reminder of what I was. And what I'll never be again. Mrs. Lorne stared, stunned. Her voice caught. Clara, is that true? I met her eyes. Every word. And she didn't scream. She didn't run. She just nodded slowly. Eyes full of something I hadn't expected. Respect. You're braver than I ever knew, she whispered. Then she turned and walked away, hands tight at her sides. Mason stared after her, a ghost in his own skin. She didn't yell at me, he said quietly. No, I replied. Because sometimes, the truth spoken in public is the loudest punishment of all. He lowered his head. I'll keep telling it, he said. If anyone asks. I won't hide again. Good, I said. Because we're not done yet. Later that evening, I saw him alone in the hallway mirror, staring at his reflection, the belt still strapped around his wrist like a wound that never quite healed. And for the first time, I saw something shift in his posture. Not shame, not fear, but accountability. Real, unflinching. Like he was finally understanding that redemption wasn't something you ask for. It's something you bleed for. By the 17th week, Mason no longer flinched when he passed the basement. That in itself was a victory. Because once, he dragged me down those steps with a belt in one hand and rage in the other. Once, he left me there, stripped, bound, and broken. And now, that door remained open on purpose. Not because he was free from it, but because he was haunted by it. That morning, I found him sitting just inside, at the top step, staring down into the darkness below. Not crying, not rocking, just remembering. I stood quietly behind him. You still think about it, I said. He nodded slowly. Every morning. What part? He swallowed. The silence after I stopped hitting you. When you passed out, I remember how quiet the house was. Like it was dead. And I liked it. His voice broke at the end. And that's the part that makes me sickest. I sat beside him. You know what I remember? I asked. He shook his head. I remember the way you hummed when you walked away. You didn't even look back to see if I was breathing. You just hummed a song like nothing had happened. His face crumpled. That's who I was, he whispered. No, I said. That's who you chose to be. We sat there a while, both of us staring into that familiar darkness. Then I stood and walked down the steps. For the first time in years, I didn't feel my chest seize or my hands shake. The room that once devoured me now looked smaller, weaker. Mason hesitated, then followed. When he reached the bottom, he stood behind the very chair he had tied me to. His fingers hovered near the armrest, like he was afraid to touch it. Sit in it, I said. He turned to me stunned. What? Sit. In the chair. He hesitated, then lowered himself slowly, the wood creaking beneath his weight. His wrists rested where mine once bled. His back leaned where my skin once stuck. Now close your eyes, I said. He obeyed. I stepped behind him and whispered, Can you feel it? Yes, he breathed. What do you feel? Shame. Filth. Regret. And, he choked slightly. Fear. Good, I said. He opened his eyes. I want you to remember this feeling every time you pass this room. Every time you lift a fork. Every time you look at your own hands. Because this is the man you buried inside me for years. And now he lives inside you. He nodded, chest rising with heavy breath. I'm not going to hurt you, I said. I never was. Because if I did, you'd think we were even. He looked up at me teary. And we're not. No, I said coldly. We'll never be even. But I'm done being your prisoner. Now you get to live with the weight. I turned and walked back up the stairs. He didn't follow. Not right away. And I didn't call him. Let him sit there. Let him rot inside his own memory. Because the basement was never just a room. It was a grave. And now he was buried in it too. It was the middle of the night when I woke to the sound of footsteps, soft, slow, almost unsure. I rose from bed without turning on the lamp. I already knew it was Mason. I found him in the backyard, barefoot in the dew-wet grass, standing near the fire pit with something in his hands. The journal. His, not mine. The one I had made him write in. Every night. Page after page of confessions, memories, horrors he'd never dared speak aloud until now. He looked at me as I stepped outside, moonlight catching the dark rings beneath his eyes. The leather belt still wrapped around his wrist. Looser now. Almost limp. I want to burn it, he said. The journal? I asked. He nodded. I've written everything. Every memory I could recover. Every time I hit you. Every time I wanted to. Even the ones I buried so deep, they clawed their way out of me like poison. I crossed my arms, staying quiet. He held the book to his chest like it was pulsing in his hands. It's not to erase it, he whispered. It's not to forget. I want this chapter to end. I stepped closer, looked him in the eye. And what comes next? He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, whatever you allow. Or nothing. I'll live with that. I took the book from his hands. Held it for a second. It was heavier than I expected. Like every page carried not ink, but blood. Then I tossed it into the fire. We watched the flames swallow it slowly, page by page, until the black curled into orange and drifted into the sky. I used to think destroying something made me powerful, he said, voice soft. But now I know, it's the ones who endure that have real power. I looked at him. Is that why you tried to kill mine? His lips quivered. Yes. Because yours scared me. I nodded slowly, feeling the fire's warmth on my face. It still should. He didn't respond. But he didn't look away either. When the last ember of paper curled and vanished, I reached into my pocket. Pulled out a small knife. His breath caught. I walked to him, raised his arm, and gently slid the blade beneath the loop of the leather belt around his wrist. Snip. It fell to the grass like a snake shedding skin. He stared at it, wide-eyed. You'll never wear that again, I said. You don't get to carry the past like a badge. He nodded slowly, tears in his eyes. I don't want to. I looked up at the stars, my chest calm for the first time in years. Good. Because you're not done earning your life back. But tonight, Mason, tonight was a start. We stood in silence, side by side. No screams. No bruises. Just the sound of fire, and the ghost of an old war finally quieting. Because sometimes, you don't need revenge to win. Sometimes, just surviving is the loudest victory of all. The newspaper came early that morning. Folded neatly. Innocent in appearance. But inside was a letter. A journalist had somehow heard whispers, an anonymous tip sent to the editor's desk about the man who beat his sister bloody and lived in her house like nothing ever happened. The letter didn't include names. But it included enough. Enough for the townspeople to guess. Enough for the shame to resurrect. Mason brought it to me wordlessly, his hands trembling like the past had returned with teeth. I didn't do this, he whispered. I swear. I believed him. Because I knew he was too ashamed to tell the world, let alone parade it. Still, the damage was done. By noon, people had begun to stare. By evening, one woman stopped me at the grocery store and muttered under her breath, "How could you live with someone like that?" I didn't answer. But Mason heard about it. From 3 different people. And that night, as we sat on the porch, he turned to me and said something I never thought I'd hear from him. "I'll leave, Clara." I didn't reply. "I'll go. I'll find a shelter. Get a job, sleep on a floor. I deserve it. You shouldn't have to carry this anymore." I looked at him for a long time, and then said no. He blinked. "What?" "You don't run. Not this time. You stay. You face it. But they'll hate me. They should." He looked down. I continued, "You didn't deserve peace for what you did to me. You still don't. But I worked too hard to build this house back into a home, and I won't let your shame undo that." He nodded slowly. But the real moment came the next day. We went to the market together. For the first time in years. Side by side. And when the whisper started, when a man stepped too close to me and muttered something cruel under his breath, Mason stepped forward. Between me and the world. Not with fists. Not with fury. With his voice. I hurt her, he said loudly, without flinching. I was the monster. I did things no man should ever do to anyone, let alone his sister. But she didn't bury me. She made me see. She broke me open, and I've spent every day since trying to earn what I never deserved. The crowd went silent. You could hear the carts creaking on the tile. She's not weak, he said, turning to look at me. She's the strongest person I've ever known. And I'd give up every breath I have if it meant protecting the peace she finally has. Some people sneered. Others turned away. But a few nodded. And me? I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But release. He didn't run. He stood. He spoke. He carried the truth like a weight he would never again set down. That night, as we sat in the quiet of the porch again, he asked one last question. Do you think I'll ever deserve your forgiveness? I didn't look at him. I just said, you're not supposed to deserve it. You're supposed to work until the day you die, hoping it finds you. And he nodded. Because he understood. Before you scroll away, I need you to hear this. Not for him. For every woman who was ever beaten into silence, stripped of her dignity, and told she'd never be believed. This story, my story, isn't just about pain. It's about what comes after. The final test came on the anniversary of that night. 1 year to the day since Mason stripped me, tied me to a chair, and beat me until I bled. Since he left me unconscious in the dark, thinking I'd never rise again. He didn't remember the date. But I did. I had marked it quietly on the back of my calendar with a single black dot. No words. Just a memory disguised as ink. He woke early that day, as always. Swept the kitchen. Made tea. Cleaned the porch. I watched him move, not like a man pretending, but like someone genuinely changed. There was still guilt in his eyes, yes, but there was something else too. A weight that had settled into a permanent place in his bones. That night, I asked him to sit across from me at the dining table. 2 plates. 1 candle. He looked nervous. He always did when I invited him to sit with me, instead of beneath me. I poured the tea. Served the bread. And then I slid something across the table. The belt. He stared at it. Frozen. I thought I wasn't supposed to touch it again, he whispered. You aren't. Then why? Because I need to see if you remember. His hands stayed still. He didn't touch it. Didn't even look at it too long. And finally, I exhaled. You passed, I said softly. He blinked, confused. What? I waited a year, Mason. A full year. Not for you to suffer. But to see who you would become when no one was watching. And today, you passed. His throat tightened. His eyes filled. I'm not asking for it, he whispered. But I'll never stop hoping for it. I stood up slowly. Walked around the table. Placed my hand on his shoulder. You'll never be the brother I once had, I said. You can't undo the monster you became. But he looked up at me. You're not that monster anymore. He wept then. Right there at the table. Not with shame, but with release. I let him cry. And when his breath returned, I took the belt in my hands, walked out the back door, and tossed it into the fire pit one last time. This time, he didn't need to watch it burn. Because it wasn't for him. It was for me. To close the book. To rise from the ashes of what he did. Not as a victim. Not as a survivor. But as the woman who won. And if you've ever felt alone, silenced, or destroyed by someone who is supposed to love you, hear this. You don't need to wait for their apology. You don't need to wait for them to change. You don't even need revenge. What you need is your voice. And once you reclaim it, they can never take it from you again. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, and subscribe to Whispers and Wills. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had to forgive someone who didn't deserve it? Because sometimes, the deepest stories are the ones we bury inside ourselves. Until we finally let them speak.